The aroma of roasting turkey filled my kitchen, a Christmas Day tradition I cherished. But this year, the festive cheer was tainted by the sight of Cassandra and Marcus hauling a bulky armchair through my back door. "Just making some room, Mom," Marcus said, his voice a little too casual. Cassandra, trailing behind him with a lamp, simply offered a tight smile. "Your guest room is so underutilized," she added, her eyes flitting around my meticulously ranged space. They didn't ask, didn't even hint at this rearrangement. My guest room, the one I'd kept pristine, filled with antiques and family heirlooms, was being repurposed without a word of consultation. "We thought it would make a lovely nursery," Marcus chimed in, as if reading my mind, and a knot formed in my stomach. A nursery. They hadn't even told me they were expecting. "Oh," was all I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. I watched, a strange numbness settling over me, as they proceeded to empty the contents of their Cara crib, a changing table, boxes overflowing with baby clothes into my house, into my guest room. It felt like an invasion, a slow, creeping takeover of my space, my home. The scent of pine needles from the Christmas tree in the living room mingled with the dust stirred up by their furniture, a strange, dissonant blend. "We figured, with all this extra space," Cassandra began, her voice trailing off as she unpacked a box of picture frames. I noticed they were wedding photos, pictures of her and Marcus beaming, their lives intertwined. They were creating a home here, in my home, without so much as a "by your leave." "It's a lovely thought," I said, forcing a smile, "but perhaps you could have discussed this with me first." My voice was steadier now, a hint of steel beneath the polite veneer. Marcus looked up, a flicker of something guilt, perhaps, crossing his face. "We didn't want to bother you, Mom. You've been so busy with everything." He gestured vaguely around, his words hanging in the air like an unspoken accusation. "Busy. I'd been enjoying my retirement, tending my garden, volunteering at the local library, the simple pleasures I'd looked forward to after years of hard work." Cassandra, seemingly oblivious to the tension, continued unpacking. "Where do you think this would look best?" she asked, holding up a framed ultrasound image. I pointed to a blank wall. "There, perhaps," I said, my voice tight. It was my house, my wall, yet I felt like a guest in my own home. The day wore on, the festive atmosphere gradually replaced by a growing sense of unease. The Christmas dinner, once a symbol of family unity, felt strained, the conversation stilted. I watched as Cassandra and Marcus discussed paint colors for the nursery, their voices animated, their plans solidifying with each passing moment. They were making themselves at home, quite literally. I excused myself early, pleading a headache. The truth was, my heart ached. This wasn't the Christmas I'd envisioned, the peaceful, joyful celebration in my own home. As I lay in bed, the sounds of their laughter filtering through the walls, a cold resolve began to settle in. They thought they could just waltz in and take over. They thought they could treat my home like their own personal playground. They were wrong, very wrong. This was my house, and I would not be pushed aside. The gears in my mind began to turn, slowly at first, then faster, a plan forming in the quiet of the night. I had welcomed them into my home with open arms, but they had mistaken kindness for weakness. They had no idea what I was capable of. They would soon learn that a mother's love has its limits, and they had crossed mine. The Christmas spirit might be in the air, but the spirit of something else entirely was stirring within me, something that whispered of reclaiming what was mine, of a subtle, quiet revenge that would unfold in the coming months. And it would all begin with a simple, seemingly harmless gesture, a gift, perfectly wrapped and presented with a smile. They wouldn't suspect a thing. Not yet. Rain lashed against the front door, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. "Mom, we have something we need to talk to you about," Marcus said, his voice strained. Cassandra stood beside him, clutching her purse, her usual bright smile dimmed. They looked like two children caught in the downpour, and for a moment, a pang of sympathy washed over me. Come in," I ushered them inside. "Don't stand out there in the cold." I took their coats, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that had settled in my stomach. "We've had a bit of a setback," Marcus began, avoiding my gaze. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a nervous habit I'd noticed more frequently lately. "With the apartment, you know." I waited, my heart sinking as I braced myself for what I suspected was coming. "There was a problem with the plumbing," Cassandra chimed in, her voice a little too high-pitched. "A major problem. The whole building's been condemned." I raised an eyebrow. "Condemned? That seems rather sudden." Marcus wrung his hands. "Yeah, well, these things happen. The landlord's not being very helpful, either. We're basically homeless." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. My mind raced. Condemned. It felt like a convenient excuse. But what other explanation could there be? "So what are you thinking?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "We were hoping," Cassandra began, trailing off. Marcus picked up where she left off. "We were hoping, maybe, just for a little while, until we find somewhere else, we could stay here." He gestured vaguely at my living room. "Just temporarily, of course." Cassandra nodded enthusiastically. "We wouldn't be any trouble. We can even help out with chores and groceries." A hollow laugh threatened to escape my lips. Chores, groceries. They hadn't lifted a finger since they'd moved in, their temporary stay having stretched into weeks, their belongings slowly but surely taking over my guest room, then spilling into the hallway, the living room, even my study. "Of course, dears," I replied, forcing a smile. What choice did I have? They were my family. I couldn't leave them out on the street. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need." Relief washed over their faces. Too much relief, perhaps. "Oh, thank you, Mom," Marcus exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "You're a lifesaver." Cassandra echoed his sentiments, her eyes a little too bright. "We won't forget this." I patted their backs, my smile faltering. I had a sinking feeling I wouldn't forget this either. Over the next few days, their belongings continued to migrate from the guest room to the rest of the house. Boxes piled up in the hallways, clothes overflowed from the laundry hampers, and the kitchen counter became a permanent display of their breakfast cereal and half-empty coffee cups. I tried to remain patient, reminding myself it was only temporary. But then, one evening, while sorting through the mail, I found a stack of unopened envelopes addressed to Marcus and Cassandra. Bills, overdue bills. Credit card statements with balances that made my head spin. A final notice for their car payment. My stomach churned. This wasn't a temporary setback. This was a financial sinkhole. I confronted Marcus that night. "I found these in the mail," I said, placing the stack of bills on the coffee table. He avoided my gaze. His face flushed. "Oh, those," he mumbled. "It's just we had a few unexpected expenses. Nothing we can't handle." "Unexpected expenses," I repeated, incredulous. "Marcus, these are final notices. Your car is about to be repossessed." He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with shame. "We'll take care of it, Mom, I promise." How I pressed. "How are you going to take care of it when you can't even pay your rent?" He looked away again, his silence a deafening confession. It was then, in that moment of stark realization, that the pieces clicked into place. The sudden condemnation of their apartment building, the overly enthusiastic gratitude for my offer of temporary housing, the steady encroachment of their belongings into every corner of my home. It wasn't a temporary setback. It was a calculated takeover. They hadn't just moved in, they'd moved in permanently. And they hadn't asked, they'd assumed. A quiet fury began to simmer within me. They had taken advantage of my kindness, my generosity, my love. They had treated my home like their own, disregarding my feelings and my needs. I retreated to my bedroom, the weight of their deception pressing down on me. I felt a profound sense of betrayal, not just from my son, but from the daughter-in-law I had welcomed into my family. As I sat on the edge of my bed, staring out at the twinkling city lights, a plan began to form in my mind. A plan to reclaim my home, my life, and my dignity. They might have thought they had won, but they hadn't even begun to understand the game I was about to play. Christmas was just around the corner, and I had a special gift in mind for my dear son and daughter-in-law. A gift that would remind them of the true meaning of family, respect, and boundaries. A gift wrapped in a bow of sweet, sweet revenge. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Cassandra's parents, Beatrice and Frank, had arrived unannounced, their luggage practically bursting at the seams. "We thought we'd surprise you all," Beatrice chirped, her voice echoing through my quiet living room, now cluttered with extra suitcases and shopping bags. Surprise was an understatement. It felt more like an invasion. "Just a little visit," Frank added, patting my shoulder a little too heartily, "to help Cassandra and Julian settle in." Settle in. They were acting like they owned the place. My own son, Marcus, just stood there, a sheepish grin on his face. "Mom, I hope you don't mind," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. "They wanted to see you new arrangements." New arrangements. That was one way to put it. My guest room, once a sanctuary of peace and quiet, was now overflowing with their belongings. My antique dresser, a family heirloom, was hidden under a pile of Julian sweaters. The days that followed were a blur of activity, a constant hum of noise and movement that grated on my nerves. Beatrice and Frank, with their boundless energy and well-meaning but intrusive advice, rearranged my furniture, critiqued my decor, and even started reorganizing my pantry. "Minnie, dear," Beatrice said one afternoon, holding up a jar of my homemade preserves, "these must be years old. We'll clear these out and make room for some fresh things." My throat tightened. These were my things, my home, my memories. Yet, I felt powerless to stop them. Evenings were no better. Dinner became a boisterous affair, with everyone talking over each other, except me. I sat quietly, picking at my food, listening to Beatrice and Frank brag about Julian's latest business venture, a tech startup that seemed perpetually on the verge of taking off, but never quite did. "He's such a go-getter," Beatrice declared proudly. "He'll be a millionaire before you know it." I forced a smile, the bitter taste of irony clinging to my tongue. Julian, in my opinion, was more of a talker than a doer. His grand plans often fueled more by wishful thinking than actual effort. One evening, as I was trying to read in my now crowded living room, I overheard a hushed conversation between Marcus and his father-in-law. "I'm just worried, Frank," Marcus was saying, his voice strained. "The bills are piling up, and the business isn't generating any revenue yet." Frank sighed. "I know, son, I know. We're stretched thin ourselves, but we'll figure something out." Something cold and hard settled in my stomach. Figure something out. Were they using my home, my resources, to prop up Julian's failing business? Later that night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the pieces of the puzzle slowly clicking into place. The sudden move, the overflowing guest room, the constant talk of Julian's business venture, as it all pointed to one unsettling conclusion. They were in deep financial trouble, and they were using me. A wave of nausea washed over me. I had welcomed them into my home, offered them my support, and they had taken advantage of my kindness. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The anger and hurt were still there, simmering beneath the surface, but something else had taken root. A quiet resolve. I wouldn't let them take everything from me. I had worked hard for my home, for my security, and I wasn't going to let them squander it away. It was time to take matters into my own hands. As I went downstairs, I saw Cassandra sorting through a box of old photographs. "Oh, these are lovely, Mom," she said, holding up a picture of me and my late husband on our honeymoon. "So romantic." I looked at the photo, a bittersweet ache in my chest. "Yes," I said softly, "they are." And then a flicker of an idea, a seed of a plan, began to take shape in my mind. Perhaps Christmas this year would be a little different than they expected. Perhaps it would be a time for reclaiming not just my home, but my own sense of self-worth. The smile that crept across my face was small, almost imperceptible, but it held a hint of steel. The game, I realized, was far from over. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Over the past few weeks, a creeping unease had settled in my stomach, a knot tightening with each passing day. It started small, almost imperceptible. Cassandra leaving shopping lists on the kitchen counter, "Just a few things, Mom, if you wouldn't mind." Then it was Julian's car parked permanently in my driveway, "Just until we get that permit sorted, Minnie." Now, it was the constant stream of deliveries arriving at my door, boxes addressed to Marcus, filled with electronics, clothes, things they certainly couldn't afford. "A little treat for ourselves, Mom. We work hard," Marcus had said, a strained smile on his face. One afternoon, I found Cassandra sorting through my linen closet. "Just looking for extra towels, Mom. Ours are getting a bit threadbare." She held up a fluffy, cream-colored towel I'd received as a wedding gift. My heart constricted. Those are my best towels, Cassandra, I said, my voice wavering slightly. Perhaps you could buy some new ones. Her smile faltered. Oh, right, of course. Silly me. But the towels disappeared from the closet later that week. The unsettling feeling intensified when I overheard a hushed phone conversation between Marcus and Cassandra. I told you we shouldn't have ordered so much, Cassandra hissed. What if she notices the credit card bills? Marcus's voice was low and urgent. Relax, she won't. Just keep her distracted. She trusts us. My breath caught in my throat. Distracted. Trusts us? What were they hiding? The next day, I decided to visit my financial advisor, Mr. Henderson. Just wanted to check on a few things, I told him, trying to sound casual. He looked at me over his spectacles. Everything all right? Minnie, yes, of course, I replied, my voice a little too bright. He smiled politely and pulled up my accounts. As he scrolled through the transactions, his brow furrowed. Minnie, he began slowly, have you made any large purchases recently? There are several transactions here that seem unusual. He pointed to a series of charges for expensive electronics, designer clothing, and high-end restaurants. My blood ran cold. These weren't my purchases. They were Marcus and Cassandra's. They were using my credit cards. I must have misplaced my card. I stammered, my face burning with shame. Mr. Henderson looked at me with concern. Minnie, are you sure? This is quite a significant amount. I mumbled something about needing to check my records and quickly excused myself. I walked home in a daze, the world spinning around me. The rain had stopped, but a cold, hollow ache had settled in my chest. How could they, my own son, the sweet boy I'd raised, and his wife, the woman I'd welcomed into my home with open arms? They were stealing from me. They were using me. The pieces began to fall into place. The constant requests for small favors, the disappearing items from my house, the hushed whispers and furtive glances. They had woven a web of deceit around me, and I, in my naive trust, had walked right into it. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one they hadn't yet claimed, and stared out the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. I felt a profound sense of loss, not just for the money, but for the trust I'd placed in my family. The next day, I found Marcus in the kitchen, humming cheerfully as he made coffee. "Morning, Mom," he said, a little too brightly. "Sleep well." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the loving son I remembered, but a stranger, a man consumed by greed and desperation. "Marcus," I said quietly, "we need to talk." He avoided my gaze. "About what, Mom?" "About the credit card bills," I replied, my voice steady. The color drained from his face. "I can explain," he stammered. "Explain what, Marcus?" I asked, my voice rising. "Explain how you and Cassandra have been systematically bleeding me dry. Explain how you could betray me like this." He hung his head, shame etched on his features. "We're in trouble, Mom," he mumbled. "Julian lost his job, and we're drowning in debt. We didn't know what else to do. So you decided to steal from your own mother?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth hung heavy in the air between us. I felt a surge of something cold and hard in my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was resolve. I had been foolish, naive, and trusting. But no more. Get out, I said, my voice low and steady. Get out of my house. He looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief. Mom, please, I said, get out. I repeated, my voice firm. Both of you. And don't come back until you're ready to tell me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He left, his shoulders slumped, defeated. I stood there, alone in the silence of my home, the emptiness echoing the hollowness in my heart. The house felt different now, tainted by their betrayal. But as I looked around, a flicker of something else ignited within me, a spark of determination. I would reclaim my life. I would reclaim my home. And they would learn that there are consequences for their actions. This Christmas, things were going to be very different. The afternoon sun slanted through the living room window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one Cassandra had relegated to the unused corner near the fireplace, supposedly to make space for Julian's oversized gaming chair. Mom, it's just practical, she'd said, her smile tight. You hardly ever use it anyway. That chair, however, represented more than just a comfortable place to sit. It was a symbol of my life before they moved in, a life where I had control over my own space, my own things. Now my home felt less like my sanctuary and more like their storage unit. Even the scent of the air had changed. The faint aroma of lavender and vanilla I'd always enjoyed was overpowered by the artificial tang of Julian's energy drinks and Cassandra's overly sweet perfume. I closed my eyes, letting the wave of resentment wash over me. I knew deep down that they were struggling. Marcus, my son, had always been a bit impulsive with his finances. Cassandra, bless her heart, tried her best, but she had expensive tastes and a penchant for online shopping that didn't match their income. I'd overheard snippets of their whispered arguments, hushed anxieties about mounting debt and overdue bills. I'd even seen a collection notice addressed to Marcus tucked carelessly under a magazine on the kitchen counter. My heart ached for them truly, but their struggles didn't give them the right to treat me and my home this way. Mom, are you asleep? Cassandra's voice startled me. I opened my eyes to see her hovering in the doorway, a laundry basket perched precariously on her hip. Just resting my eyes. Dear, I replied, forcing a smile. What's up? She hesitated for a moment, then stepped into the room. Julian's parents are coming for Christmas, she announced, a nervous tremor in her voice. They'll be staying for a week. A week? My small guest room, already crammed with their overflow belongings, wouldn't accommodate 2 more people. I could feel the anger simmering just beneath the surface, but I kept my voice even. That's lovely. Cassandra, when exactly are they arriving? The 22nd, she replied, wringing her hands. I know it's short notice, but she trailed off, her eyes pleading. I knew what was coming. We were hoping, she continued, that maybe you could, well, maybe you wouldn't mind staying with your sister for a few days. My sister, bless her soul, lived in a tiny apartment across town, filled with cats and the lingering smell of cigarette smoke. It was hardly a relaxing environment, especially during the holidays. The thought of being packed off like an unwanted parcel, just so Julian's parents could have the guest room, sent a fresh wave of resentment through me. "I'll think about it, Cassandra," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. She seemed relieved, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. As she left the room, I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at my small, meticulously tended garden. It was a haven, a place of peace I had cultivated over the years. And now even that felt threatened. The idea of being banished from my own home, during Christmas no less, was simply unacceptable. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. It was time I took control. A plan began to form in my mind, a seed of an idea that grew with each passing moment. They wanted my house for Christmas. Fine. They could have it. But they weren't going to get it the way they expected. I reached for the phone, a determined glint in my eye. "Hello, David," I said, my voice steady and calm. David was my financial advisor, a shrewd and discreet man who had handled my late husband's estate. "I need to discuss some changes to my will," I continued, "and I also need to talk to you about setting up a certain arrangement. Shall we say, regarding my property." I spent the next hour on the phone with David, outlining my plan in meticulous detail. It was a bold move, a gamble, but I knew it was the only way to reclaim my life. I wouldn't be bullied or manipulated any longer. I would show them, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't some helpless old woman they could push around. This was my house, my life, and I was taking it back. As I hung up the phone, a sense of calm washed over me, a feeling of power I hadn't felt in months. The Christmas lights twinkled outside, casting a warm glow on the freshly fallen snow. It was going to be a very interesting Christmas indeed. The weeks that followed were a blur of quiet activity. "Mom, are you sure you need all these photo albums?" Cassandra asked, perched on the arm of my favorite armchair, the one I'd reupholstered myself just last year. "We could store them in the attic, free up some space." I smiled, a tight little smile I'd been practicing in the mirror. "Oh, I'm actually going through them," I said, patting the album on my lap, sorting out some for Eleanor. Cassandra's eyebrows shot up. "Eleanor, but she's only 5. Surely she doesn't need dusty old photos. It's never too early to appreciate family history," I replied, opening the album to a picture of my late husband and me on our honeymoon. That was the start of it. Slowly, subtly, I began reclaiming my home. Julian mentioned he needs a new desk. Cassandra said a few days later, eyeing my antique writing desk, "He's working from home more now, and that corner looks a bit cluttered. Don't you think?" "Cluttered?" I echoed, feigning surprise. "Oh, I rather like it. This desk belonged to my grandmother. It has sentimental value." Cassandra's mouth tightened, but she didn't push it. I saw the flicker of frustration in her eyes, and it gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. The next day, I brought down boxes from the attic, filled with Christmas decorations. "All ready?" Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. It was only mid-November. It's never too early to start feeling festive. I chirped, arranging a string of fairy lights around the living room. "Besides," I added, with a wink, "Eleanor loves Christmas." This became my go-to excuse. Eleanor loved everything, it seemed, especially the things that inconvenienced Cassandra and Marcus. Bit by bit, I started putting things back where they belonged. My favorite armchair migrated back to its rightful spot by the fireplace. My grandmother's writing desk became my domain again, adorned with fresh flowers and a framed photo of my husband. My china, previously relegated to the back of the cupboard, now graced the dining table for every meal. "Mom, are you having a party?" Marcus asked one evening, looking bewildered by the formal table setting. "Just celebrating family," I said, smiling sweetly. The subtle shift in power dynamics wasn't lost on Cassandra. "You seem energized lately," she remarked one afternoon, watching me rearrange the furniture in the living room. "I suppose I am," I admitted. "It's nice to have a project." She didn't press further, but the suspicion in her eyes told me she was starting to wonder what my project really was. My project was reclaiming my life, my home, my peace. It was a quiet revolution, fought with doilies and Christmas carols. I started cooking my own meals again, filling the house with the aromas of my signature dishes, the ones my husband used to love. Cassandra and Marcus were polite enough to eat what I served, but I noticed they weren't as enthusiastic as they used to be about my cooking. Their appetites seemed to have diminished since they no longer had full control of the kitchen. One evening, while I was trimming the Christmas tree, an enormous, extravagant one that took up half the living room, Cassandra approached me hesitantly. "Mom," she began, twisting her hands. "About Christmas, Julian's parents are coming to visit. We were thinking of having Christmas dinner at their hotel. It's a 5-star, with a Michelin-starred restaurant. It would be easier. Easier for whom, I wondered. "Oh, that's so thoughtful of you, dear," I said, my voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "But I've already started preparing everything here. Eleanor would be so disappointed if we didn't have Christmas at home, wouldn't she?" Cassandra's face fell. "Well, yes, but it's settled then," I said brightly, picking up a glass ornament. "Christmas at home, just like old times." I watched her walk away, defeated, and a small smile played on my lips. The house was beginning to feel like mine again, filled with the warmth of Christmas lights and the comforting weight of tradition. I had a few more surprises planned for Cassandra and Marcus, a few more subtle shifts in the balance of power. They thought they were taking over my life, but I was just playing the long game. And Christmas, my favorite time of year, was the perfect time to deliver the final act of my quiet revenge. The crisp autumn air nipped at my cheeks as I walked down Main Street, the fallen leaves crunching beneath my feet. I stopped at Mrs. Henderson's antique shop, the little bell above the door tinkling as I entered. "Good morning, Minnie," Mrs. Henderson greeted me, her smile as warm as the antique quilts she sold. "Looking for something special today, perhaps?" I replied, my eyes scanning the shelves filled with porcelain dolls and dusty teacups. "I'm thinking of redecorating a bit." Mrs. Henderson chuckled. "That sounds like a big project. Anything in particular you have in mind?" "Something festive," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "Perhaps something with a touch of Christmas cheer." We spent the next hour discussing various Christmas decorations, and I ended up purchasing a beautiful antique advent calendar and a set of hand-painted ornaments. My next stop was the local bakery, where the aroma of freshly baked bread and cinnamon rolls filled the air. "Minnie, dear," exclaimed Mrs. Peterson, the baker, as I walked in. "Haven't seen you round lately." "I've been busy," I replied vaguely, "but I couldn't resist the smell of your cinnamon rolls." "Just the usual dozen?" she asked, already reaching for a box. "Actually," I said, "make it 2 dozen. And a couple of those pumpkin pies as well. I'm expecting guests." Mrs. Peterson raised an eyebrow, but just smiled and said, "Coming right up." After leaving the bakery, I drove to the bank. Mr. Davis, the bank manager, greeted me warmly. "Minnie, good to see you. What can I do for you today?" "I'd like to access my safe deposit box." "Please," I said. He nodded and led me to the vault. Inside my safe deposit box, nestled among my important documents and a few pieces of heirloom jewelry, was a small velvet pouch. I slipped it into my handbag, a sense of quiet resolve settling over me. Back home, the house felt eerily quiet. Cassandra and Marcus were both at work. This was the perfect opportunity to start putting my plan into motion. I went to the attic, the dusty air thick with the smell of old wood and forgotten memories. Carefully, I began to retrieve boxes filled with Christmas decorations, garlands, twinkling lights, nativity scenes, and the treasured ornaments I'd collected over the years. These decorations, normally a source of joy, had been relegated to the attic for the past few years. Cassandra had deemed them old-fashioned and replaced them with her own minimalist, modern decorations. But this year, things would be different. As I brought the decorations down from the attic, I began to hum a Christmas carol, a lightness in my heart I hadn't felt in a long time. I placed the antique advent calendar I'd bought from Mrs. Henderson on the mantelpiece, its little wooden doors promising a countdown to a very different kind of Christmas. I carefully unpacked the hand-painted ornaments, each one a reminder of Christmases past, of family traditions, of happier times. The next day, I invited a few of my closest friends over for tea. "Minnie, your house looks wonderful," exclaimed Martha, her eyes twinkling as she took in the festive decorations. "It's been so long since we've had a proper Christmas gathering." "Yes," chimed in Eleanor. "It's just not the same without your touch, Minnie. Cassandra's decorations are, well, let's just say they lack a certain warmth." I simply smiled, taking a sip of my tea. "I thought it was time to bring back some of the old traditions," I said casually. Over the next few weeks, I continued to transform my home into a winter wonderland. I baked cookies, hung wreaths on the doors, and filled the air with the scent of pine and cinnamon. I even started playing Christmas music, much to Cassandra's initial annoyance, which quickly morphed into a resigned sigh. She seemed to have given up on arguing with me, perhaps sensing a change in my demeanor. One evening, as I was decorating the Christmas tree, Marcus came into the living room. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "this is a lot." "Is it, dear?" I replied, placing a delicate glass ornament on a branch. "I think it's just the right amount of Christmas cheer." He shifted uncomfortably. "Cassandra isn't too keen on all the clutter." "Well, Marcus," I said, turning to face him, "this is my house, and for once, I'm decorating it the way I want to." He opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it again, a flicker of understanding or perhaps just resignation in his eyes. As Christmas drew closer, a sense of anticipation filled the air. I had one final piece of my plan to put into action, a surprise that I knew would be the perfect Christmas gift to myself. I glanced at the calendar, a sly smile playing on my lips. Christmas Eve was just around the corner. Christmas Eve. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the air, a stark contrast to the icy knot in my stomach. I watched as Cassandra and Marcus bustled around my kitchen, directing Julian as he struggled to carve the turkey my turkey, cooked in my oven. Julian, darling, a little higher on the breast, Cassandra trilled, not even glancing my way. It had been 3 months since they'd moved in, 3 months of my life slowly being erased, replaced by their chaotic, entitled presence. Mother, Marcus said, his voice tight, could you pass the gravy? He didn't even look at me. He just held out a hand, expectant. It was time. Actually, Marcus, I began, my voice calm despite the tremor in my hands. I have a few things I need to discuss with you both. Cassandra finally turned, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. Can't it wait? Mother, we're about to eat. It's rather important, dear. I replied, my smile unwavering. I saw a flash of unease cross Marcus's face. He knew me well enough to recognize that tone. All right, he sighed, gesturing towards the living room. Let's go in there. I followed them, taking a deep breath as I entered the room that had once been my sanctuary. Now, it was littered with their belongings. Julian's overflowing gym bag, Cassandra's discarded magazines, Marcus's half-finished projects. So what is it? Cassandra asked, impatiently tapping her foot. I took a seat on the armchair, the one they'd tried to relegate to the basement, claiming it clashed with their new decor. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, I began, my gaze sweeping over their faces, about family, about respect, about boundaries. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. What are you getting at, Mom? I'm getting at the fact that this is my house, I stated, my voice firm, and for the past 3 months, I've been treated more like a housekeeper than a mother. Cassandra scoffed. Oh, please, we're just trying to help you. You were rattling around in this big house all alone. Helping yourselves, you mean, I retorted, my eyes locking with hers, to my food, my belongings, my space. You even tried to rearrange my furniture. Julian, bless his heart, looked bewildered. He'd clearly been oblivious to the underlying tension. Look, Mom, Marcus interjected, his voice placating. We know things have been a bit hectic, but we're family. We're here for you. Are you? I challenged. Because it doesn't feel that way. It feels like you've taken advantage of my kindness, of my willingness to help. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small stack of papers. I've spoken to my lawyer, I continued, holding their gaze, and I've had these drawn up. Cassandra snatched the papers from my hand, her eyes scanning the pages. Her face paled. What is this? She stammered. Marcus took the papers from her, his expression mirroring her shock. An eviction notice, I stated simply, effective immediately. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the crackling fire in the hearth. Julian cleared his throat nervously. But where will we go? He asked, his voice small. That, my dear Julian, I said, rising to my feet, is not my concern. You had 3 months to figure out your finances. 3 months to show me the respect I deserve. You chose to do neither. I walked towards the front door, pausing to look back at them. "Merry Christmas," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. I opened the door. The crisp winter air welcomed change from the suffocating tension inside. As I stepped out onto the porch, I could hear Cassandra's wails erupting from within the house, followed by Marcus's frantic attempts to calm her. I didn't look back. I had booked myself a suite at the Grand Hotel for Christmas Eve, complete with room service and a view of the city's festive lights. And in my purse, nestled amongst my belongings, was a first-class ticket to Hawaii, departing Christmas morning. My house, my life, my peace, all mine again. The best Christmas present I could have given myself. The crisp December air nipped at my cheeks as I surveyed my garden. Finally, truly mine again. Cassandra's parting words, "You'll be all alone now," rattling around in this huge house, echoed in my ears. But for the first time in months, the words didn't sting. They felt hollow, empty, like the promises they had made when they first moved in. "Just for a few weeks, Mom, until we get back on our feet." Weeks had turned into months, their belongings slowly consuming my space, their demands chipping away at my peace. I knelt by the newly planted rose bushes, their bare branches a promise of spring blooms. "Just like me," I murmured to myself, a small smile playing on my lips. Ready for a new beginning. This garden, once overrun with their inflatable Christmas decorations and Julian's discarded gym equipment, was now a sanctuary again. I could almost smell the lavender and rosemary I planned to plant in the spring, and vision the hummingbirds flitting around the feeder I'd dusted off from the attic. The house itself felt lighter, too, free from the constant clutter and the tension that had thickened the air like a humid summer day. "Remember when you said I wouldn't be able to manage this place on my own?" I whispered to the empty air, picturing Cassandra's condescending frown. "That I'd be begging you to come back," I chuckled, a low rumble in my chest. They hadn't known, couldn't have imagined, the quiet strength that had bloomed within me during those difficult months. I stood, brushing the dirt from my hands. The removal van had been and gone, taking their mountain of possessions with them. Marcus had looked bewildered, Cassandra furious, Julian just blank. "But Mom," Marcus had stammered, his voice tinged with confusion. "Where will we go? We have nowhere else." I had simply smiled, a gentle, unwavering smile that held no trace of the turmoil I had endured. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I'd replied, handing him the keys to their new apartment. "I've already paid the first 6 months' rent. An apartment. A small, cozy apartment, far away from the sprawling quiet of my home. Not quite what they were accustomed to, certainly not the lavish lifestyle Cassandra had so carefully cultivated. They hadn't known, of course, that I had been quietly selling off some of their more extravagant purchases. The designer handbags, the limited edition sneakers, the ridiculously expensive espresso machine they insisted they needed. It had been surprisingly easy. People are always looking for a bargain, and I had meticulously documented every item, every serial number, every inflated price tag. The proceeds, along with the hefty early termination fee I had received from the film crew renting my property for a Christmas movie, a deal I conveniently forgot to mention to them, had been more than enough to secure their new accommodation and replenish my own somewhat depleted savings. It was a simple plan, really. Quiet, efficient, and utterly satisfying. I walked towards the back porch, pausing to admire the newly cleaned windows sparkling in the afternoon sun. The Christmas lights I had painstakingly strung along the eaves twinkled merrily, a stark contrast to the bare, unadorned windows of the apartment building I could just make out in the distance. I had ensured their view faced directly towards my festively decorated home, a gentle reminder, perhaps, of what they had lost. Inside, the house was warm and inviting. The aroma of cinnamon and pine filled the air, a testament to the Christmas tree I had decorated just for myself. This year, there would be no arguments over tinsel placement, no complaints about the old-fashioned carols I enjoyed. This Christmas would be mine, peaceful, quiet, and gloriously, blissfully solitary. I poured myself a cup of hot chocolate, the rich, sweet aroma filling the quiet kitchen. As dusk settled, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, I sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a soft blanket. The crackling fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating a sense of warmth and contentment I hadn't felt in months. I opened a book, the words blurring slightly as my mind drifted back to the events of the past few months. The hurt, the anger, the quiet resolve that had hardened within me. It had been a difficult journey, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to protect my peace. A soft knock at the door startled me. I hesitated, a flicker of apprehension crossing my face. Who could it be at this hour? I peered through the peephole, my heart skipping a beat. Standing on my doorstep, bundled in a thick winter coat, was Eleanor, my daughter, my other child, the one who had stayed away, respecting my boundaries, offering support from afar. "Mom," she said, her voice muffled by the scarf wrapped around her face. "Can I come in?" A wave of warmth washed over me, chasing away the last vestiges of the chill that had settled in my bones. "Of course, darling," I replied, opening the door wide. Come in," as Eleanor stepped inside, her arms laden with gifts. A genuine smile spread across my face. Perhaps this Christmas wouldn't be so solitary after all. Perhaps, just perhaps, I had something even more precious to celebrate than just the reclaiming of my home.